What if I were to tell you there is a cornerback on the Philadelphia Eagles right now that once upon a time was a third round pick? And many people, I'm talking about fans leaving comments, to content creators making content, to actual analysts, pretty much consider this guy to be a steal, one of the steals of the draft, because he took off the 2020 college football season due to an illness and concerns over the pandemic that was at hand at that time. This individual has actually started 11 NFL games as a cornerback. He's been active for 42 games. In his last active season where he was on a 53-man roster in the NFL, he actually had a top 50 coverage grade. But the current situation is he's fighting to stay relevant. And to be quite honest about his prospects of making the Philadelphia Eagles, he's going to have to dig this one out, man. He's going to have to give it everything that he has because he's starting with absolutely no leverage. He's starting with absolutely no social capital. There's no resume here to just award you a spot based upon your previous, play. Basically, he's trying to carve out a role with the Philadelphia Eagles. Would that be something you're interested in? Placing aside my very obvious fanboy nod in that entire structure there to Martin Landau, who was playing a character called Bob Ryan on Entourage, if you guys kind of caught on to the structure of that sentence I just did there, what if I told you? Would that be something you're interested in? You guys, if you watch this show, you know exactly what I was doing there. A lot of you guys have kind of chimed in and you've asked me, hey, man, quit trying to be so right about everything. It sucks the life out of stuff, Steve. We know you know football. But if there's no room for back and forth, there's no room for an I got you, I told you so. Well, then, it's not really a community. I hear you guys. I get what you're saying, right? Which is essentially take some gambles on long shots to make the roster and then basically kind of loosen up and have fun. Well, today I want to do that for you. I want to take a long shot at the roster to make it. And I want to separate this from the conversation of UDFAs because I think UDFAs are entirely separate conversation from guys who were once drafted commodities who are trying to fight their way onto the roster because they've fallen out of favor with their former team that drafted them. And by the way, there's more than just one guy on the roster with this exact label. I mean, we can literally go to the running back room and stick to the same exact freaking franchise and team and talk about Elijah Mitchell. But that's not who we're talking about today. Today, we're talking about Ambry Thomas, former Michigan Wolverine, and a guy that, on the back end of your roster is a young man that is a special teams performer. He's a player, a guy who has kick return, essentially, background. And then on top of that, this is a young man that he's logged some actual snaps in the NFL and played against some pretty damn good players. And sometimes he fared well, and you could see the talent. Other times, let's be honest, you don't end up in this situation if it's all golden. All right, y'all. I want to go ahead and just flip the tape on, and I want to take you into the good first, guys. We're going to draw up a play, and I'm going to show you the good as it comes to analyzing this player, and then we'll go ahead and we'll turn it around and we'll go into kind of getting into more of the complex nature of things and where I see where this man has to improve if he wants to stick on the roster on the back end as an experienced guy who's still young, very young player, but nonetheless is going to have to carve his way out, roll out, if you will, on the team. All right, y'all, to the play. All right, guys, the play I want to show you today starts off as that classic two-high structure. You can see here, guys, as I'm illustrating it. Starts off as two-high structure, gives you kind of that quarters look. And then kind of post-snap, you're going to get what probably is likely some form of cover six, which is quarter, half, with this side of the field being more of your quarter side where AJ is. This side of the field basically being the half side where Smitty and Quez are. And kind of the way this works out almost is just a really good instinctual play by Ambry Thomas that kind of shows, his ability to have zone eyes in the play. It's impressive for a guy who's buried deep in the roster, but nonetheless has playing experience. And, while there are some underlying concerns about this player, I do think this is, a situation where you can see there's some talent with the player. Now, just to talk real quick about the line of scrimmage, because I don't think it's clear the way I have it illustrated, guys. The way, remember, you always have to have 7 men on the line of scrimmage. Believe it or not, the way that this is drawn up, actually, Dallas Goedert is the tight end, is the 7th man on the line of scrimmage. That means AJ cannot be on the line of scrimmage, because if he is, That would render Dallas Goedert an ineligible receiver. Now over here, you have Smitty. Smitty would be on the line of scrimmage. Quez Watkins would not. So Smitty on the line of scrimmage basically makes the right tackle ineligible. Lane Johnson, obviously your tight end on the line of scrimmage, renders your left tackle ineligible, which would be Jordan Mailata. That's just the basic rules of how things go, guys. All right? So what you're going to see here is smash concept. Can y'all see the smash concept, guys? And there's different variations to smash concept, but generally speaking, guys, you're trying to high-low your corners here. And I think if you really pay attention to the film, the guy that's playing to the quarter side, this safety, yeah, I don't want to completely dog him because I don't think it's 1,000% his fault because Jalen's eyes are moving towards this safety, moving towards the middle of the field. So I think that's what gave, Jalen's like, yeah, there should be space to operate out here, but that's when Ambry Thomas just does a really good job of falling backwards and taking that play away. But basically what you're seeing here, guys, is like a really unique look in terms of like how, you could see a player who is a potential piece to the roster, the way that he can play in real game situations, right? To where he is locked up on a guy like Smitty, who's a damn good player. I believe Diamador Lenore is your actual nickel cornerback in 2023 for the 49ers. Ambry Thomas flip-flopped a little bit between being kind of your field. So this side of it right here, guys, with Smitty is your field. You can see kind of like where I got the center placed here, guys, in terms of the hash marks. All right, so that's your field. This is your boundary, guys. And, I think he just does a really good job. If you watch the play and just kind of watch him fall out and what he does here, I got to give credit where credit's due, man. I'll dog these players when I think they're not doing their job correctly, when I think that they have not done their work in terms of the tape study. But this is a case where this is a guy who is buried. This is you're taking a risk by putting, Ambry Thomas on the roster. But I do think if you're going to take a long shot on a guy who has played and started games in the league, being a decent special teams contributor on top of that, being a fifth guy, carrying in terms of outside corners, like, yeah, I could see this guy surprising. I wouldn't project it completely, but if there's going to be a surprise, I think it's going to be a guy like Ambry Thomas surprising people. Right now, you're probably thinking to yourself, like, Steve, this young man shows pretty fluid hips. This young man has very good zone eyes. Like, you're right. He was all over that play. Like, he read that play perfectly. He knew exactly what the concept was. He knew exactly how to defend it, and he had the athletic, ability to go defend it against a damn good receiver there. So what's the catch? I want to go ahead and turn our attention towards another play that I think illustrates a little better the complexity of the player here. Because while this man is a pretty damn good athlete, this is not a guy who lacks athletic ability. I will tell you on tape, and it's hard sometimes to describe it because it can be scheme related. It can be situationally, related to the game circumstance, right? If teams got a big lead, like in the San Francisco game, playing the Eagles, like, yeah, of course you're going to get some pretty big off coverage, right? The whole object is just don't let anyone get past you. So, there are some reasons to why some things like this can happen from time to time. But the point I'm making, guys, is that when I went to his tape, I did see a guy who's very athletic, and yet he just at times had a hard time locating the ball in the air and also was affording entirely too much of a cushion versus NFL receivers. Like, he didn't need to afford this much cushion here. Like, this guy's athletic enough to run with them. This is those tricky situations, but we're going to get into the analysis here, guys. So let's go ahead. Let's run to the tape. I want to break down this play for you. All right, guys, we're going to go back in, and once again, we're going to take a look at a two-high structure. Okay, with your safeties is how it initially starts out, all right? You got essentially Ambry over here to your left side, which is the boundary side of the field. Okay, he's on Smitty. And then over here on the right-hand side, you got a combination of Oz and you got Quez. And then, both of these guys are kind of playing with the cushion, right? This quarterback's playing with about an 8-yard, cushion on Quez. I would call this more right around like a 7-yard cushion here. They're both in plus splits, meaning outside the numbers, right? If that's the numbers, they're both aligned outside of those numbers, okay? So Quez and Smitty, all right? When you look at your 7 men on the line of scrimmage, you got Rodgers, and then you're going to have all the way outside the numbers here is Quez, who's going to be on the line of scrimmage. So anyone inside of them that is on the line of scrimmage, they are an ineligible receiver, right? So Lane Johnson, ineligible receiver. Because Rodgers on the line of scrimmage, that would then make Mailata an ineligible wide receiver, guys. All right? Let me give you the circumstances, because I do think the circumstances matter of what is happening here. You're in a situation where you're in the first quarter, okay? There's 7:28 to go on the clock. It's 1st and 10. They're at the 50-yard line, and it's a 3-point game. The Eagles have a 3-point lead, okay? So this line I'm representing here, guys, that's the 50-yard line, essentially. And then I drew out some really rough hash marks, guys. Take a look at what you have here in terms of the under defenders, right? So you got your Sam Backer, who's playing pretty deep off of the actual, the line here. And he's a hook defender. You got your Mike, who's playing as a hook defender, but he's a little closer to the line of scrimmage, right? He's about 3 or so yards off of it, probably. 3-4 yards, somewhere in that area. Normally it's a 3 to 5 yard depth. But your nickel cornerback is actually going to push towards the flat here with Oz. All right? So your safety is going to carry and hug that line. He starts off very solid, almost like you could potentially have a single high look, right? They're trying to disguise it. They're trying to hold this from Jalen. Okay? But then he's going to eventually squeeze that line, and he's going to kind of watch over Oz as Oz kind of carries a little bit. Okay? And then you got your outside guys out here who are gaining depth and playing on their players. This is one of those situations to where I do caution people to be careful because we really don't know if this is a matter of something they're doing schematically from scheme. It's not situational because they're on the 50 freaking yard line, 1st and 10 in a 3-point game. It's not like this is a 10-plus point lead here, and you're just basically running clock in the 4th quarter, so you don't care. You'll give anything that, happens below where your corners are in terms of their depth. Just don't let anything get over top of your head. That's not the situation here. This is where, I watch a guy like Ambry Thomas, and I wonder to myself, the dude has all the athleticism in the world. Maybe this is just specific to San Francisco during this time in 2023 and the way they like to play their corners at times, but I would much prefer the second play I'm about to show you, okay? And the second play, I think, is a better illustration of a better way of playing Ambry Thomas, even though he gets beat. I would much rather have my guy get beat, Ambry Thomas. If you moved him down here and you played him closer on Smitty, I would much rather him get beat that way because Smitty just sinks his hip and is just really fluid in his hips. I just think it's more disruptive, man. I think you can throw the timing off more that way. I would much rather lose that way than lose the Steve Nelson way. Remember 2021, guys, with Steve Nelson out there towards the field side? You remember that? Where we were giving 7, 8, 9 yard freaking cushions with Steve Nelson. It was just pitch and catch outside the numbers on us. Yeah, that's the fear I have with Ambry Thomas is some of the stuff doesn't make sense with the way they're trying to play this young man. Let me tie this up into a knot, guys. When I evaluate players, and mind you, both players I'm talking about were guys who played in the NFL for a very long time, and while one is thought of very, very highly, and the other one amongst Eagle fans, maybe we don't hold the highest regard for them. I want to keep in mind both of these guys stuck around the NFL for a long time, so no matter what you think about them, there's complexity to what I'm about to say. But I also want to be clear about this. I think there's a fine line between a Darius Slay and a Ronald Darby, right? Both guys very athletically gifted. Both guys very, very fluid hips for corners. Both guys, I think, could play, basically either side of the field. They could play as kind of the boundary guy, or they could play out to the field side, so where you're playing on the field side as a left cornerback, or to the boundary specifically as a right cornerback. And mind you, the boundary and the field can get flipped depending on the positioning of the ball guys, but nonetheless, it's kind of how they classify them normally. I always thought that when I watched the tape that Ronald Darby sometimes was being played out of place by the Philadelphia Eagles, and he should have probably been playing more so towards the field side than the boundary. And, when I look at Ambry Thomas's film, I kind of get the same, kind of feeling here. This is not a short-armed guy. You're talking about a guy with over 32 inches in the arm reach here, right? I mean, he's a sub-6-foot guy, but, you're splitting hairs. He's 5'11", 7/8 guys. It's 1/8 difference. So, he's pretty much 6 foot tall. He's got adequate size and adequate length to play as a corner, and he's got the fluid hips to play as a corner. He's a guy that, honestly, if I was kind of scouting this and trying to, mesh up where I think he would be, good at, I think primarily I'd want to play him towards the field side where I can utilize some of that athleticism, some of his ability to flip and move in the hips, right? Now, I'm not saying in modern NFL you got to be able to play both sides of the field, guys, but primarily. I'm talking about a primarily alignment. This is a tough one, man, because I think the underlying athleticism, the things from a measurable standpoint is there. There's a failure to launch here, just like with Ronald Darby, but just on a much smaller scale. I still have to give Ronald Darby respect because he played in the league for a long time and started a crap ton of games. Ronald Darby did have a ton of talent. It wasn't always just really bad with Ronald Darby. Ronald Darby did have seasons where he was one of the better corners in the league. It wasn't consistent. And in Philadelphia, I have never seen a guy who would be in the hip pocket, would be in phase with the receiver as well as Ronald Darby would be. And then the ball would be thrown up in the air, and he would just have the damnedest time tracking the ball and being able to play through a receiver's hands. It was like something was just failing to launch here with Ronald Darby. I feel the same way when I look at Ambry Thomas. I get a little bit of the same sense. There's like, man, he's way too fluid in the hips from what I see from him from the testing drills and just other, reps that he shows me on the field to where this is too much cushion he's affording players. Get up here and be competitive and challenge it. And the other thing I will say for him is, and I think this might even be the larger sticking point for him, is if you're going to play in zone systems, you have got to give more consistent effort in the low zone when it comes to teams attacking you in terms of the flats and then the run game. You got to do a better job of wrapping up and tackling. And it's on his film where he can do it. He has shown moments on his tape where you're like, damn, playing pretty physical here. But then there's other moments where it's like, yeah, I mean, he's doing that typical corner stuff where they half-ass the play. But the problem is like when you're kind of fading out, you can't be like Darius Slay and these guys or other big name corners who might not always come up with the greatest effort in the run game. You got to earn your way, bro. You're not going to get afforded that kind of thing. You got to play a little dirty. Have a little nastiness to your game. Because I definitely think that there's a talent level here with this guy. There's a reason why when you guys, some of you guys ask me this, there's a reason why I'm taking the risk on this player to bring him up to you. I know that this is probably not going to be a popular player that you're going to hear about unless he starts shining in camp. I think if you start hearing stuff in camp, then you'll hear other content creators start to, get into the mix about this. But I'm just telling you from what I see here, the underlying talent's there. He's got to capitalize upon opportunity. Because I do think technically, if they carry 5 outside corners, and that's not a guarantee. They can go with 4 and carry 2 nickels, especially depending on how they want to look at that nickel position in terms of having a nickel defensive back. And then, mixing and matching that nickel defensive back with safety, having that versatility, just like Cooper DeJean, right? You can look at Gush. Gush can play both roles, right? Michael Carter can play both roles. So it's not a straightforward shot on the roster, but if I'm talking about an underdog, a guy who comes out of left freaking field, guys, someone that there's no reasonable reason why any of us should suspect him to come out of left field like this. But yet, if you're asking me to put my thinking cap on it and tell you a guy that might beat the odds like that might surprise us, I definitely think Ambry Thomas is like one of like 3 or 4 guys that I kind of have in my mind that I'm going to bring up before we get to training camp, that I think, kind of there's an outside shot here to kind of just watch it a little bit, right? I'm not telling you to put forth great effort into studying this guy, but just keep his name in mind because this young man, there's underlying talent here. All right, guys, if you like this format, if you like this type of content, if you're like, yo, I love people who come in and like talk about tape breakdown and, kind of show you some of the underlying things that's going on from a schematic situation and, give you some of the insights from experience coaching and playing, man, I got some film for y'all to watch, all right? Look, take a look up here, guys. I think you're going to really enjoy this video if you're into that kind of content, and I'm going to do you a bonus. I'm going to throw you another one right up here, guys, that's also going to go into some of those aspects, man. Kind of keep you in the groove, right? Like, hey, man, this is unique. I want to kind of keep going down this avenue. I want to see more videos like this. Check this video out right here, guys. All right, y'all. Peace. I'm out of here.